And that jeweller in Kentish Town mended this very necklace, so do try and help. Well, now to our second reconstruction tonight. Just over 7 weeks ago, a 72-year-old woman was found dead in her home in Salford. At first, it seemed she'd died of natural causes, but then it became clear that she'd been asphyxiated. How or why is still a mystery. Georgina Davis was known as Jean to her friends and neighbours, and it's with their help that we've been able to build up a picture of her life and the events which led up to her death. Our reconstruction takes place in Higher Broughton in Salford. Jean lived in one of the newer houses in Mildred Street. Her husband died 14 years ago, and since she had no other family, she lived alone.
Morning, Jean.
Oh, hello, Lorna.
It's a nice day, isn't it?
Yes, it is. If it keeps up, I'm thinking of taking the dogs over to Ainsdale Beach and giving them a bit of a run.
Oh, good. Do you think they'll sleep tonight, then?
Jean was a very house-proud lady, always keeping the house clean and tidy and spick and span outside and in. She was a very nice person to speak to. She was a totally professional nurse. If you can understand me, she was a lady who had been nursing all her life, and that's what she lived for, actually.
Jean retired 18 months ago as matron of Broughton House, a home for disabled servicemen, but she still did part-time private nursing. Her social life centred on the Griffin, her local pub. A few of her friends met there regularly on Tuesday evenings. If she wasn't working, she often joined them. Jean had one other regular evening appointment, which is still unexplained. The local butcher opposite the Griffin describes what he saw every week.
About 6 to 6:30, usually near to 6:30. Jean always used to come and stand on this corner, one night a week. And the black escort, she used to come from the direction of Littleton Road, used to pick her up. If the lights were on red, it picked her up on the Cromwell roadside. If they're on green, she crossed over and it picked her up outside the telephone box. And it always drove off in the direction of Great Clew Street.
Apart from nursing, Jean's other great love was animals. She had 2 dogs of her own which she adored, and she took them for walks once or twice every day. On Tuesday, the 20th of May, Jean took the dogs, as usual, to the old Salford racecourse in the afternoon. It was the last day any of Jean's friends or neighbours saw her alive. Their statements provide us with a patchy account of that day.
I went to the post office that day, caught the number 13 bus back, and then I crossed over the road and saw Jean with her 2 dogs.
Hiya, Jean.
Oh, hello, dear. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
How are your parents getting on?
Oh, they're all right.
She seemed normal within herself, quite happy.
One's exhausted.
We both walked together up until I reached our house, and I presume Jean then went to her house.
I'll tell my mum who was asking about
Do. Bye.
Well, it'd be about 5:45 to 6 o'clock. It had been raining and it was a pretty sort of murky evening, really. I was aware of a car passing, didn't realise at the time that it was Jean's Metro. But when I looked back, I saw this car had parked on the opposite side of the road, and I saw Jean coming across the street. She looked a bit angry, actually, so I thought, well, you know, it's not a kind of time to have a chat to her, really. And then I came into my drive and she sort of disappeared to go into hers.
That particular Tuesday night, I'd been on the racecourse walking the dog. On my way off, I decided I'd call at Jean's and invited out for a drink. It was near enough 9 o'clock time, give or take a bit either way. And when I got into Mildred Street, I walked up to the house, knocked on the door, rang the bell and banged on the window. It generally made quite a noise, like, so she'd know it was me. And waited a few minutes and got no answer. So I just presumed that she was at work and went home and got changed and fed the dog. And I went across to the Griffin about 10 o'clock time. Evening all.
You up? Usual.
Although it was Tuesday, Jean didn't join the others that night. Then at midnight, a neighbour driving down Mildred Street noticed something slightly unusual. There was a light on in Jean's spare bedroom window. The next afternoon, when Jean was late for work, her employer rang her and then drove to her home. When she found the broken window, she called the police.
Foxtrot to Sergeant Nicholson.
Full name, please.
Yes, can you rendezvous with 7160 at 1 Charlie, Mildred Street, Salford 7, please? They have a suspicious death.
Jean's body had been found upstairs in her bedroom. She died from some kind of pressure to her neck.
Hello, Dennis. What's the position up here now?
Well, it's pretty tidy up there, but the lads are working on it now.
Yeah, thanks very much.
There were no obvious signs of violence nor any struggle, but gradually more details emerged which suggest Georgina Davis was murdered. Well, Mr. Patterson, what makes you believe now that she was murdered?
Well, although initially there were very few signs of disturbance in the house, we now know that certain property, including a set of house keys with a Yale and a Mortis key on them, are missing, together with a handbag like this, which Mrs. Davis owned, and a blue cagoule with a white stripe down the side.
And she'd been seen wearing that very day, hadn't she? So that is suspicious.
Yes, this is what she was wearing that day. I am particularly interested in finding this item of clothing. Also missing from the house is a pair of green Wellington boots similar to these.
So if anybody's seen any of those items of clothing or some keys, please to let you know.
Yes, that would be of extreme importance to me.
Now, Jean wasn't a great socialiser, was she? She was quite a private person, didn't talk about her private life, which has given you quite a lot of problems. What do you most need to know about her life?
Well, one thing has come to light. She is known to have met someone once a week who owns a black A-registered Ford Escort vehicle.
This is the car the butcher saw?
This is the car that pulled up at the traffic lights near the butcher's shop, yes.
The butcher isn't sure exactly which night of the week it was?
No, it could be either Tuesday, Thursday or Friday, our information at the moment. We have no idea who owns this vehicle at all, and it is important that we find that person.
And you don't think it was a patient she was going to see?
It's unlikely, because normally she was very well dressed when she went out on that particular evening.
Right. Now, for a few weeks before she died, she hadn't been making those regular visits on Tuesdays to the Griffin pub, had she? Where do you think she might have been instead?
Well, it's possible that the black escort could be connected with this, or we have also heard that she had other jobs that we haven't found out about yet. Anyone who has employed Mrs. Davis over recent months, I would very much like to talk to.
Right, so you need any patients of Jean's in the recent weeks, the driver of that escort, black escort we saw, and anyone else in particular that you'd like to trace?
Yes. Outside the house at 7 a.m. on the Wednesday morning were two men wearing blue boiler suits. These men had a van parked nearby, and they were seen to be looking at the house. We have never traced those men.
And finally, what's vital is you need to know somebody who perhaps saw her between 4:15 and 6 o'clock on that Tuesday, the 20th of May.
Yes, at 4:15 p.m. she came back from walking her dogs. She was then seen coming back in her car at 6 p.m. I do not know where she was in between, and I would like to find out.
Perhaps somebody can solve the mystery. Thank you very much indeed. This is the number to ring, 01811 8055, 01811 8055. If you can't get through here, or you'd rather phone locally, police are waiting for your call at the Crescent Police Station in Salford. That's 061 855 5151, 061 855 5151.
Well, now to the first of this month's reconstructions. It's the murder of a Chinese restaurateur 6 weeks ago. He was killed by burglars at his home in London, but the possessions stolen by the killers could turn out to be their downfall. This is Gerrard Street in London's Chinatown, one of the few places in Britain you'll find Chinese jewellery. It was pieces identical to these that were stolen in the murder: 3 jade pendants, a dragon and phoenix bracelet, a wedding ring and a gold chain. The victim rarely came to this area, but his picture is now posted throughout Chinatown. His name is Keng Fung. He was killed, it seems, for £100 and that small amount of jewellery. He lived just off the Seven Sisters Road in Holloway. He'd moved from the United States last year to live with his son here in Sussex Way. He was a quiet, rather private man, with few friends or interests outside the family. At 66, he was in good shape and liked walking to keep fit. Monday, the 11th of August, was very much like any other day. And as usual, at about 10:30 that morning, he set off to stroll to Kentish Town, 2 miles away. Just around the corner from the Town and Country Club is Fortis Road and his son's fish and chip shop, the Sun Doe. Mr. Hung's son, Keng Fung, has owned the shop for several years. He and his wife work hard here 7 days a week. That Monday, Keng Fung was especially pleased to see his granddaughter, Rosie. She and her mother had stayed the previous night in the living quarters above the shop. They were preparing food and making the pancake rolls to sell at lunchtime. Keng Fung knew a great deal about the catering trade. He jointly owned a restaurant in Brooklyn in New York. This photo was taken 11 years ago. He'd lived all across the world, in Guangzhou, in China, in Hong Kong and in Jamaica. After selling up the Brooklyn restaurant, he'd come to live in England 15 months ago with his son and family. The restaurant sale had left him money for his retirement, and he still had plans to travel before settling down. Mr. Hung stayed at the shop until closing time just after lunch at around 2:30. Then he and his son left to go back to Sussex Way to have their own lunch.
I have news about your son.
What is it?
你阿叔同你阿嬸啊，依家人在香港，咁啊佢哋咧就，我諗今年咧就翻去香港了啊。
你幾時想去啊？
大約聖誕時間啦嚇。
食飯，食啦。
The son remembers nothing was unusual that Monday afternoon. At about 4:45, he left to go back to the shop. His father seemed happy and at ease. Keng Fung loved reading and gardening. At 6:50 that evening, a neighbour noticed he was out in his garden cutting back the ivy. This was the last time Keng Fung was seen alive, except, that is, by whoever killed him. It seems he spent the evening quietly in the house. A light was on in the downstairs room where he normally watched TV.
50 Manchester United supporters have arrived back at Harwich after last night's violence in Amsterdam.
Whatever happened, the TV was certainly switched off by morning. We know he had an evening meal and washed the dishes, but the light stayed on all night. Sometime between 9 and 11 p.m, at least 2 people got into the house. They stabbed, tortured and battered Keng Fung to death. The man now hunting for his killers is Detective Superintendent Fergus Corker, and it was a particularly horrible and vicious killing, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. An appalling attack on a defenceless man who suffered horrific injuries, and the people responsible must be caught.
Are they Chinese? English? Do we know?
At this stage, I can't really say.
Now, the jewellery they took is very distinctive. I've got one item here. This is pure gold, and it's quite something. The most recognisable piece, in fact, is identical to this. It is gold, and to describe it, here's Dr. Stephen Tang from Manchester, who's an expert in Oriental jewellery of this sort.
This is a gold bracelet. usually presented to the bride before her wedding. It's from the close relatives of the family, with a dragon and a finished design with a double happiness in the middle. It represents harmony and fortune. The value will cost the family perhaps a few thousand of dollars, Hong Kong dollars, and yet it's not the value that is money value that's important, it's the sentimental value that is within, which is most paramount.
So you need anybody who's seen that jewellery to call you. Any other clues?
Yes, any of that jewellery particularly, and about 4,500 luncheon vouchers were stolen of various denominations, but they're all marked in one of two ways. Either the marking of two lines across at the front of the voucher, or a form of Z-type marking. They're all marked in one of those ways.
I mean, frankly, if I've got several thousand luncheon vouchers, which perhaps I shouldn't have, or I've got this sort of jewellery, which again, maybe I shouldn't have, I'm going to be a bit worried about calling you.
Sure. Well, I would appeal particularly to any of the criminal fraternity who may have come into possession of those items to ring me in the strictest of confidence. I'm not worried about their possession at this time. I'm solely concerned in the identity of the people responsible.
You're not going to take action against them?
At this stage, no.
Now, what about the killers? How many of them? What do we know about them?
From the inquiries we've made so far, I'm satisfied that there were at least two of them, and they left the house and walked down Sussex Way in the direction of Seven Sisters Road, which is a very, very busy thoroughfare. As they turned into Seven Sisters Road, there is the Safeway supermarket, and directly outside Safeway's there is a bus stop with numerous buses stopping there and carrying passengers on up towards Finsbury Park.
Now this is between 9 and 11 p.m. at night. Lots of people around, lots of pubs near there too.
That's right. No doubt at all, if people were at the bus stop or on the buses, I would appeal for them to recollect if they saw at least two people, both of whom indeed would have been bloodstained.
OK, those pubs, very quickly.
Yes, there's three public houses where people may have come from. The Enkill Arms at Hornsey Road, or the next one at the junction of Seven Sisters Road, and the Nag's Head at Holloway Road.
Right. There's a £5,000 reward. If you can help, please call us. A particularly horrible killing. The number to ring if you can help, 01811 8055. If you've any information at all, please call 01811 8055. You can speak to a detective or to a BBC researcher, and in English or in Cantonese. Or you can call the incident room at Holloway Police Station on 01 263 9090. That's 01 263 9090. Our next film is about the sad death of Lorna Hayles, sometimes known as Lorna Black, a bubbly, exuberant young woman who, underneath the smiles, may have been rather lonely. She had a 12-year-old son and seemed upset that his adoptive parent was taking him to live abroad. To the world, she remained vivacious and energetic. She was very small, incidentally, just 5 feet tall. Now, around the 1st of August, perhaps as the result of an argument that got out of hand, someone who probably knew her killed her by plunging a carving fork into her neck. The reconstruction begins, though, 1 month after that, on the afternoon of Friday, the 29th of August, in South London. Tasman Road in Brixton. Police were called to investigate a swarm of flies at number 5. Lorna hadn't been seen for weeks and her neighbours were concerned. She was lying on the bedroom floor and forensic tests showed she'd been there since the beginning of the month. She was probably killed on Friday, the 1st of August.
How's Instagram? Can I help you?
Detectives have had a great deal of cooperation. Everyone liked Lorna, and they can find no reason for her murder. But maybe you can fill some crucial gaps in the calendar they've built up of her final weeks. This is a week before she died, the City of London, on Thursday, July the 24th. Lorna arrived for work as usual at Call Quick Printers in Chamomile Street, but suddenly packed in her job. Before she left that day, she was her normal, talkative self, and this colleague remembers her saying she was planning a fundraising barbecue for her local Labour Party. To make friends and earn a little extra cash, Lorna helped out in the Brixton Town Hall Social Club. She was last seen here on Friday evening, the 25th of July. The day after, on Saturday the 26th, She came here to Young's Court in Battersea. She still had the keys to her old flat here. She'd sublet the place, but now still called round from time to time.
Part 3 of the Best of Rod. We start with a top 5 hit from the beginning of 1978.
Hi.
Hot Legs.
How are you?
All right.
All right?
Yeah.
Great.
I just come to pick up some things.
That's very good. You're welcome.
This man, Albert, was her tenant, and he recalls that Lorna was planning to go out that afternoon and had called round for a special dress.
Hey, girl, where are you going dressed up like this?
I'm going to a fashion party.
Great.
Does I look nice?
You look beautiful.
This photo shows Lorna in that very dress. She'd hardly be missed in all that striking gold. And yet, still detectives don't know whose party or whose fashion parade Lorna was going to that day. The next day, Sunday, was the day of Lorna's barbecue. But curiously, at 2:30, just before it was due to start, she asked a fellow Labour Party helper to give her a lift here to Clapham Road.
Goodbye. Thanks for the lift. I'll see you later.
All right, see you, Lorna. Bye-bye.
She said she had to go to Putney. It may not be significant, but this is another gap in Lorna's last week. Did she go to Putney that afternoon? She could have taken the Victoria or Northern lines to almost anywhere from Stockwell Tube. By 9 o'clock that evening, her barbecue was almost over, except for two couples who arrived late. They apparently knew Lorna, but no one else there knew them. The police say they want them to call in to Crimewatch, simply so they know who these people were. Clapham Common on Wednesday, the 30th of July. It's now about 2 days before Lorna died. The police know she came here that afternoon to hire some videotapes. She had no work that week, and detectives would like to know how else she filled her time.
Hello.
Even without work, Lorna always kept herself busy. On Thursday lunchtime at the laundrette in Landor Road, these women remember her calling to see if they were free for a sales demonstration at her home that evening.
Are you coming to my handweight party tonight?
I can't, I've got to have my hair re-permed. But can you still order what we wanted? Bleach and a floor cleaner?
I suppose I could do.
Oh, thanks, Lorna.
Bye.
All right, bye, Lorna. Probably see you again tomorrow.
For Lorna, the salesman's visit that evening was another chance to have people round to her house. But though she'd invited others, no one else turned up for the demonstration. The salesman recalls Lorna seemed quite relaxed.
Very clean.
That's basically it. This will last you in the course of about a year.
The salesman left by 9:15, and as far as is known, no one else called round that evening, and Lorna didn't go out. Tasman Road on the morning of Friday, August the 1st. Lorna's papers were delivered, and then there's one last sighting of her as she popped into the laundrette again. As always, she put on a bubbly, cheerful and optimistic front.
I've got an interview in North London with this writer. As a travelling nanny, it means travelling all over the place.
That sounds great. Good luck.
Thanks very much.
Let us know how you get on. Bye.
Oh, by the way, I've ordered your cleaning stuff.
Right, thanks. Bye. Cheers.
And Mr. Richards, that was a curious thing that Lorna said just at the end there. She said that she was going for this job as a travelling nanny. She already knew, I gather, that she hadn't got that job.
Yes, that's true, but Lorna's the sort of girl who'd find it very difficult to admit failure. She wanted success.
She wanted friends.
Yes.
You're pretty sure it was one of the friends that killed her. Now, why do you think that? Why was it someone who knew her?
Well, in most murder cases, of course, it's a friend or somebody who they know. In Lorna's case, we do know she was cautious. She did not open the door to anyone. She either peeped round the curtains before she let anyone in, and I don't think she would let anyone in at that time of the night unless she knew them well.
Now, as I said in the film, you've had enormous cooperation. Her friends have tried to help when they've known you've wanted them. You've traced dozens already, I gather.
Yes, we have. We've spoken to more than 200 people.
But there are still others you need to get in contact with you?
Yes, there are. There are some, I'm sure, who don't even know we're making our inquiries.
Any in particular?
Yes, well, I have a calendar here, which used to hang in her kitchen. And as you can see, on the 9th of August, is detailed a wedding.
Saturday the 9th of August, wedding, it says. She never went, of course, because by then she was dead. But who invited her?
That's exactly what we want to know.
Right. That gold dress she was wearing, now obviously that was very, very distinctive. Nobody's come forward who saw her in that.
No, nobody at all, and I don't believe she would have gone very far away from Battersea, possibly on that Doddington estate where she used to live. Somebody there can come forward and help us.
Right. You've brought an address book?
Yes, I have. This address book was from her handbag, and it shows a party.
There it is in pencil. A party on the 2nd of August, 1986. So, who invited Lorna Hayles to a party on the 2nd of August, 1986? Whoever it was, please contact us. Of course, the other thing from the film were those latecomers to the barbecue.
Yes, we still don't know who they are. They could fill in a very important part of the last days of her life. And it's vital that they come forward and talk to us.
Who are they? Any idea?
I've no idea who they are. These are other friends who we just cannot find at the moment.
Now, I gather you have some reason to believe that this was an accidental killing. In other words, whoever did it may not have intended, really, death to be the outcome.
Yes, I've got that very much in mind. And anybody who perhaps is watching this programme, he could rest assured that if he contacts us, we can think it may have been an accident. We're quite willing to talk about that. I think it was a temper and perhaps an immediate accident with one stab wound.
Well, if whoever did it is watching, do please call. Obviously, it's better if you call the police than they call on you. If you've got suspicions, then if you were involved in any of the incidents that we've shown, if you're a friend of hers, if in any way you can help, here's the number, 01811 8055, 01811 8055, or of course you can call the incident room. That's on 01 326 1212. That's 01 326 1212.
Our first case tonight is a murder. John Gaspa, a London restaurant manager, was killed just over 11 weeks ago. The manner of his death strongly suggests that somebody who knew him must have been involved in his killing. But tonight, detectives believe that viewers who may never have heard of John Gaspa might be able to help discover who did kill him. Our reconstruction starts in the West End of London, where he worked. The Pizza Pomodoro in Beak Street, London W1. It's on the north side of Soho, 5 minutes from Regent Street, and it's busy from lunchtime till late at night. John Gaspa had several partners, but as manager, he virtually lived in the place. It was a year since he'd started there, and literally hundreds of customers, particularly the women whom he made a special point of talking to, would remember his chat and easy charm. John Gaspa was something of an entrepreneur. During 1986, he'd been hoping to expand and had been looking for new businesses in London and beyond. He'd made inquiries in Hull and had recently visited properties in Taunton in Somerset. He used his Camden Town flat almost like a hotel. He rarely got home before 2 a.m. He'd bring a carton of milk from the restaurant for breakfast, the only meal he ever ate there. The flat was comfortable and secure. He never felt the need to double lock the door. If anyone wanted to get in, they'd have to obtain a key.
Penny for the guy! Penny for the guy!
It's Wednesday, November the 5th, 5 days before John Gaspa died. In Kensington High Street, West London, is Banham's, the specialist locksmiths. Sometime that day, probably during the morning, an expensively dressed couple were waiting for service. Other customers might recall an argument one of the salesmen was having with a man who couldn't prove his identity.
You can ring my solicitor.
No, we need to see some proof of ownership before we can re-register.
You can ring my estate agent.
The couple seemed uneasy and rather self-conscious. An expensive beige car, perhaps a Mercedes or a Daimler, was parked outside. Someone wanted a duplicate key to John Gaspa's home.
Can I have a kick up, please?
I'll just check the registration for you.
The letter of authority with Mr. Gaspa's signature on it was forged. But the man had one of Gaspa's rate demands and his key. A second key was duly cut.
Here's the rates demand and the registration card. If you could ask Mr. Gaspa to complete it and post it back to us. And here's the keys.
5 days later, Monday the 10th of November, the day of John Gaspa's death, Berwick Street Market in Soho. At about 5 p.m, Mr. Gaspa popped out of the restaurant to pick up a suit from the dry cleaners.
How's things?
It's all right, thank you. How are you, all right?
Very well.
Over the next couple of hours, he certainly went back to the restaurant, but it's still not clear whether he went anywhere else or met anyone else in that time. The Gardens Health Club in Kingley Street is a couple of minutes' walk from the Pizza Pomodoro. John was a regular client, and we know he checked in at exactly 6:50 that day.
Great.
Thank you very much indeed.
John spent about an hour there. He used the sunbed every other day. As he was leaving, he bumped into a business associate, Doran Zilka.
Just the man I was looking for.
How are you?
Fine, I'm just popping to the restaurant.
I'm going round there now. Come with me.
Fine.
OK. Bye, Melanie.
Bye.
Thank you.
The two men hadn't seen each other for a few weeks, and they had various joint business ventures to discuss. Zilka was there until about 10:30. During that time, he remembers John spending quite a lot of time talking on the telephone. And he also remembers something else John mentioned.
In fact, I'm leaving early because I've got to meet someone.
Apart from his intentions to leave early, John Gaspa seemed his usual self. It was just a normal weekday evening at the restaurant. He ate just before midnight, and it was after that that he broke with his usual routine.
Socky, I've got a very important meeting early in the morning and I'm leaving now. Can I have a pint of milk, please? Yes. Will you lock up? Give the keys to Tiziana so that she can open in the morning. Yeah. All right. OK. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
He may have had two appointments then, one that night and one in the morning. If he did have a meeting planned for that night, police have never discovered where it was or who it was with. They do know he left in his partner's green VW Golf, which he often borrowed. His flat is in a small block overlooking Camden Road, about a couple of miles due north of Soho. From forensic evidence, it seems he could have got back there any time between 12:45 and 2 o'clock, and he was probably alone. His flat was on the 3rd floor of Julian Court, and as he took the lift up, John Gaspa probably had no idea that someone was already up there waiting for him. John Gaspa was shot as he walked in the door. No one else in the block heard a sound. Detective Chief Inspector Ian Blair is investigating the case. First of all, what more do you need to know about where John Gaspa went on the day that he died?
We've looked into that day very thoroughly, Sue, but obviously there are gaps. He popped out of the restaurant from time to time. He made lots of phone calls, like the one that was shown on the film. And we need to know who he spoke to and who he saw when he popped out. Above all, however, what we really need to know is when he left that restaurant, where did he go and who was he with? It looks as though he was probably alone and he drove home alone, but it might be that this meeting that we're missing was somewhere else and he picked up his killer. So we're really very interested in anybody who saw John on that night.
Right. Now, going back to November the 5th, Guy Fawkes Day, when somebody got a duplicate key to John's flat from Banham's the locksmiths, you need that couple to come forward.
I need that couple to come forward. I also need everybody who was in Banham's on that day. It may have been that couple who had the key cut. It may not have been. It may have been somebody else. So I need to know anybody who was in Banham's on Guy Fawkes night.
That rates demand was genuine, and so was the key. How do you think they got hold of that?
Well, it would have been possible to get hold of the rates demand from the communal, sort of postal section of his flats, and the key must have been stolen.
But the letter, that was forged.
Yes, that was forged. I've got it here. It's grey because it's been fingerprinted, but it's on white paper. And this letter here is not in Gaspa's writing, and it's not Gaspa's signature. Now, it's possible that the Banham's end is something that Gaspa arranged, but we don't know that, and it's a very, very important clue.
It's unusual writing with the little circular dots on the eyes.
Extremely unusual, and we'd like to hear from anybody who knows that writing.
How much do you know now about John Gaspa himself?
Well, that's really the main point of the appeal, Sue. We've looked into this man's life. It's a very private life, in compartments, in which one compartment doesn't know another compartment. And in that life, there is nothing which gives an indication of why he was killed. This is a very premeditated murder. There's the key, there's the appointment to which he was obviously going. There's a diary that's missing. He wrote everything in that diary, and we have never recovered it, and it's likely that the appointment was in that. And what we're really looking for is, what is it in John Gaspa's life that we don't know about that has led to his death? Somebody wanted him dead, and they wanted him dead so badly they are prepared to go to these lengths. So I want to hear from anybody who knows John Gaspa and who has not yet contacted the police.
Mr. Blair, thank you. And if you do, and if you can help, please call now on 01 811 8055. That's 01 811 8055. And remember, there are detectives from the case here in the studio, or you can speak to a BBC researcher if you prefer. And there are lines open now to the incident room in Kentish Town Police Station. Their number is 01 725 3782 or 3786. That's 01 725 3782 or 3786. Well, now to our first case this month. Most murders are committed by someone who knows his or her victim and who has a very clear motive. Cases of indiscriminate killers who kill more than once are rare. But last month, it seems that one man met and then murdered two young women in the space of 36 hours. And police are convinced that this is the type of killer who will attack again. So your help on this next case is vital. Our reconstruction starts on the night of Saturday the 24th of January in the Bayswater area of West London. Marina Monte was a heroin addict who worked as a prostitute to finance her habit. She was 27. She had no family in England, only a boyfriend who was also an addict. On the night she died, she set out at about 10:30 to look for business around Bayswater and Paddington. She usually headed towards Sussex Gardens, but there'd still been no specific sightings of her that evening. Her killer may have been among her first clients. Mitre Bridge Railway Junction, Scrubs Lane, 3 miles from Paddington. At about 11 o'clock that night, the signalman noticed something unusual. A car turned into the service road beside the railway and stopped there for some 4 or 5 minutes. In the darkness, the signalman could see only that it was a small car. He couldn't make out what the driver was doing. Marina's body was found there by a railway worker at 7:15 the next morning. She'd been strangled, and her boots and handbag were missing. Rachel Applewhite also worked as a prostitute in the same area of West London. She was 23. Rachel lived in a DHSS hotel in Earl's Court with her 20-year-old boyfriend, Ian. They'd been together for 6 months and had frequent arguments, usually about money.
I gave you some last week.
I bloody spent it, didn't I? I need some more. Got our clothes, haven't I?
How much do you want?
20 quid.
20 quid?
That's my money anyway.
Rachel depended on Ian for friendship and companionship. She rarely saw her family. Her mother was in hospital and her father and sister lived in Oxfordshire. On the afternoon of Saturday the 24th of January, the same day that Marina died, Rachel and her boyfriend watched television in their tiny hotel bedroom. They were there until 6:30 and it was time to go out looking for business.
Nothing else on?
I just came in, I just turned it on.
Rachel had moved to London some 4 years ago and had worked as a prostitute ever since. She could be loud and aggressive and had an increasing drink problem. Shortly before 7 p.m, they arrived at Cleveland Terrace, where Rachel usually stood waiting for passing motorists to pick her up. She was soon approached by a man in an orange Mini.
Okay.
Okay.
Ian always checked out the customers. She usually spent 20 minutes to half an hour with each customer, but it was 2 hours before she reappeared at Cleveland Terrace. She was drunk and Ian was furious.
Where the bloody hell have you been? I know, Johnny, mate. You've been drinking.
A cab driver witnessed the row, and anyone else there would remember it too.
Calm down! Where the hell do you think you're going? Yeah, I'm not far away. Get out the bloody cab! Leave me alone! Get out! Bloody car! Leave me alone!
The cab driver saw them disappear in opposite directions. Ian got back to the hotel at about 11 o'clock, but he didn't see Rachel again, that night or ever.
9 to 6. Where's 9? 9 to 6.
No.
On its own.
Well, who put this one there? Me. You?
The next anyone heard of Rachel was the following day, Sunday, at around 12:30. Her father was making his daily visit to her grandfather in an old people's home in Oxfordshire.
Hello, Dad.
Are you still at the hotel?
No, I'm not there anymore. I'm staying with a friend at the moment.
He didn't know where she was ringing from or why she rang him that day.
Yeah, well, look, I've got to go now because my money's running out.
Well, look after yourself then. Goodbye.
These bloody drinks, lad. Can you get me another?
But at 9:30 that Sunday night, Rachel was seen with a man and a girlfriend in the King's Head pub, Edgware Road. And again, she was heading for a row.
If she comes over here, she's bloody going to get a load. I'll tell her, I'll bloody sort her out.
The girls who were laughing at her noticed she was wearing an odd, rather old-fashioned two-piece outfit that was much too big for her.
Oh, no. I'd love to know where she gets her gear from. It really is something of a joke. How not to look?
And she was attracting further ridicule at the pool table.
She's like a grotesque little man, isn't she?
Rachel had had enough.
You stupid slag!
It was a fight that everyone in the pub that night certainly witnessed.
Time, ladies and gentlemen, please.
Closing time was 10:30. The events which followed the fight are crucial if police are to find her killer.
Look, just forget it, all right? I'm going to the loo.
Where Rachel went next is still a mystery. It was the last time she was seen alive. She tottered out of the pub, clutching a white plastic bag. The man she was with has still not been traced. A couple of minutes later, the man followed her out. Police don't know whether the two met up again outside. The next day at Sumner Place in Chelsea. There's a row of lock-up garages behind the flats there. At about midday, a resident returned to her garage after 24 hours away. Rachel's body had probably been dumped from a car, as Marina Monte's had. And like Marina, she'd been strangled, and her boots were missing too. Well, Detective Superintendent Jim Hutchinson, both Rachel and Marina worked around the same area, and our map here shows where Marina went. We don't actually have much information about her, do we?
No, she left the hotel at about 10:30 that night. We'd like to hear from anyone who saw her leave the hotel or saw her in that area, because our next client could have been her killer.
Right. Now, you have a lot more information on Rachel's movements before she died. First of all, the driver of the orange Mini, which picked her up that Saturday night. He hasn't come forward.
No, he hasn't, and that's very important to us. She was off for a period of about 2 hours with him, and we'd like to know where she went, who she went with. It's very important to us.
She told her father on the telephone that she was staying with a friend. You don't know yet who that friend could be.
No, that's correct. She did stay with a friend. We're sure of that. We haven't found out who he is, but she had a change of clothing, you see. The clothing you see on the screen at the present moment is actually the clothing she was wearing.
That's the only picture we have of the actual clothes she wore.
Yes, that's true. That clothing is vital to us because she changed into it. Her boyfriend hasn't seen it before. It may lead us to the friend or indeed give us vital information. It had a label on the back of it, Sue. You can see on the screen it was Warren Petite. That's the manufacturer, but there were 2 names on it, and with the use of ultraviolet we managed to bring up the name P. Suarez and also the initials TK. We'd like to hear from either P. Suarez or TK who are able to say, well, that's a uniform that I wore, because I think it probably belonged to someone working into the hotel or catering trade.
Right, absolutely vital.
Yes.
The other thing is that the man seen drinking with her that last night in the King's Head and Edgware Road hasn't come forward either.
No, he hasn't, and he definitely is vital to our inquiry. Yes, he's a man of continental appearance, probably Greek or Arabic. He's about 5'9" in height, aged 35 to 45. His hair is black and it's got specks of grey in it. He's wearing gold-rimmed spectacles, and although we're not sure about the clothing, he may have had a ski jacket on. On his left finger, or finger of his left hand, he had a large medallion ring.
And somebody must have seen her at closing time after when the pub closed that night in the
Oh
Edgware
yes,
Road.
certainly. She was very, very drunk, and she couldn't have got away from there on her own. She may have been pushed into a vehicle. It's vital that anyone who saw her on the busy Edgware Road at about 10:30 that Sunday come forward and talk to us.
Is it possible that other prostitutes might be able to help?
Yes, there's a possibility. Many of the girls actually travel down from the Midlands, from Coventry, Nottingham and Huddersfield. Many of these girls haven't appeared on the streets since. They can indeed help us. We'd like to hear from them.
Mr. Hutchinson, thank you. And if you think you can offer any information about either Rachel Applewhite or Marina Monte, and particularly their movements over that weekend beginning the 24th of January last month, please ring us in the studio here on 01 811 8055 or call the incident room at Kensington Police Station on 01 741 6212. That's 01 741 6212.